Oh, hello, Tom. How you doing?
Good evening. Yeah, good, thanks. And you?
Yeah, good. Hello,
Excellent.
anyone that's joining us. Welcome to this month's Gin Me live tasting. We've managed this month to actually squeeze the tasting into the month in which you receive the gin. Of course, it is the last day of January. It's a long month. That obviously normally these tastings roll over into the next month. So when I say this is January's gin tasting, it actually makes sense this time because we're still in January and it's the gin you got in January. Yeah, glad I got that out of the way. So that gin, of course, is Illicit Gin from Glasgow. And Tom and I this month are joined by Illicit's founder, Darran Edmond, who is at the distillery. Hey, Darran, how you doing?
Evening, guys. All right. How are you?
Yeah, good. Good, thanks. Thanks so much for joining us. And it's great to have a tasting coming directly from where the gin is made as well.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Like I'm pulling a late shift tonight. I'm down in the railway arch. We've got the still behind us where the gin that the guys would be drinking was everything that we make gets distilled in that guy behind me there. So yeah.
Wow. We were saying when we sent out your gin this month, I think we put it in the email or possibly even on the tasting card, that you're probably the smallest distillery we've featured thus far.
Yeah.
And you know, the size of the still behind you kind of is testament to that, I guess. This is a small operation, right?
Yeah, I know it's kind of far, but I don't know like the scale. But I have an even smaller one, which I might grab later. I have a little 1.5 litre still, and that's where every recipe we do starts. I'll grab it now quickly, actually.
Yeah. So small it can be picked up.
Yeah. Just fits on the table here.
I love this.
Sounds like it's making a cup of tea.
I'll try not to drop it.
That.
But you can kind of see if you sort of hold them both up that that was quite good. It's exactly the same shape.
Actually, if you hold it in front of it, you could almost eclipse the other one in a cool kind of way. Yeah.
Angles to it. I'm backwards. Something like that. But yeah, all the recipes that we design start off on this still. I mean, it makes sense, right? If you are, sometimes you might be trying something that's a wee bit like, you're not sure how it's going to go. And with gin recipes, when you have 5-6 botanicals, you're trying to get the balance right. It's going to take a few attempts, right? So you don't go straight into the big. I say big, but big for us. So 150 litres, this is 1.5. So that's 100 times the capacity of the one in my hand. But yeah, so if I have an idea for something or if I'm developing a new product for myself or someone else, we always just start with a couple of runs on this.
Quick question off the bat, Darran. Do you find that when you're obviously trialing recipes with the smaller still, the 1.5 litre, do they scale closely in terms of flavour? Like, as in, because obviously you'd imagine it I guess that it'd be quite difficult to get the scale in terms of flavour when you're going from a 1.5 litre to say, I don't know how big that is, but 400 litres or 500 litres?
150, the one by me.
Is it? All right. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's a good question, and I don't have it. I could go in a lot of detail about that. It's probably not suitable for the tasting, but I did a master's degree in brewing and distilling at Heriot Watt, and my thesis project was on gin distillation. And we developed a recipe and took it from even smaller than that. We were distilling in little 500 milliliter glass round bottom flasks in a lab, and then we built it up to a 1,000 litre still. And at each stage we would distill something and we would take it to the lab and analyze it and look at the flavor profiles, so we could actually pick marker compounds that correlate to flavor. And kind of look at the concentrations and how it changed, and it's not linear at all when you scale up. So you can't take the recipe you did at 1 litre times everything by 100 and expect it to come out the same on 100 litre still. So that's a whole other kettle of fish. And one way to do it that's really simple. Well, if you wanted to do it without any of the sort of sciencey stuff, you would just kind of do it stepwise. So maybe try a 10 litre distillation, try 50 litre, go step by step, and each step compare what you've distilled to the previous one and try and say, okay, maybe a certain botanical is pushing through a wee bit too much now, so we'll dial it back. Maybe something else is getting lost, so we need to give it a boost. Or if you have access to an analytical chemistry lab, you can do it the sort of scientific nerdy way. But simple answer to that question is botanicals don't scale linearly to.
Yeah, sure. No, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Cool.
so I mean, we are going to be getting a bit geeky here, but like, what do you think that is? Because obviously there's less copper per liter, isn't there? The bigger you get, right? So that's a factor. But is it the speed at which the still runs at? Is that a factor too, or is it distillation process roughly the same from small to big?
All of that, man, and like I think the speed or like the time of distillation, because obviously a run on a 1 liter still might take you like an hour, whereas a run on 100 still might take like 8 hours.
Yeah.
So there might be extractives and the botanicals that don't come out until quite late on when the botanicals start to break down a bit in the still and stuff like that. So maybe like hardier botanicals, you don't get some of the like earthy base notes until hour 7 of a distillation. And that's not to do with its volatility necessarily. It's to do with like the physical like structure of the botanical itself.
Yeah.
And copper might, I mean, it's not so important for gin as it is for something like whiskey, but yeah, the amount of copper or the time it spends and different, the sort of, I mean, it doesn't really account for this, but in the previous example I used where you might be going from like a round bottom flask in a lab up to like a copper still, the different size and shape things and stuff like that can change. So everything basically,
Well, we've jumped straight in there, haven't we? Into the deep end.
I like I say, I did study it and stuff, so I like to like get right.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's good to know. It's interesting. Yeah.
So you mentioned your background
in
the brewing distilling course at Heriot-Watt. So did you go straight from college or university to that, or were you involved in spirits, brewing, beer, wine, whatever before that? What started the passion?
So my undergrad was chemistry, so that was very relevant, but there was quite a big gap between that and going back and doing the MSc where I did loads of other things, and it took a while before I came back to spirits and stuff. And it took a while, it seems obvious now, but like realizing that distilling's chemistry, and it's, if you have a chemistry background but you want to maybe look at something a bit more like real world, when you get to like research chemistry, it gets very like theoretical and stuff like that. Whereas I quite like I like making something with my hands that you can give to someone and you can see someone enjoy, like what we're doing today, right? Like I like that satisfaction side of it, that like, you made something nice and you can take pride in people enjoy it. And it's harder when you're working in like a lab with like crystals and little test tubes and things like to feel that. I don't know. The passion just wasn't really there for me with like lab chemistry, but it took a while before I realized that, I was really interested in spirits and distilling, and I could actually take that and go and apply the chemistry to spirits, distilled spirits. So did chemistry at Edinburgh, messed around for a wee bit doing various different things. And I was living abroad, and when I came back to Scotland, I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I got a job as a tour guide at a distillery near where I was living at the time. Oh. And similar to you guys, started with whiskey. That was the big passion. I think like going abroad, you become a wee bit of like an ambassador for your country, right? So as a Scottish person abroad, I was always like getting other people to try whiskey and stuff, and got used to talking about it. And came back and was working on a whiskey distillery. And then
which distillery was that?
So I was at Glenkinchie, which is where I'm from. I'm from East Lothian. So I was at Glenkinchie, and then I ended up in Glasgow because I worked at Auchentoshan, which is out in Clydebank near Glasgow. Then went and did the Heriot-Watt course, and I ended up on a project there with Edinburgh Gin. So the recipe I was talking about designing before was for Edinburgh Gin. Mm-hmm. And that was the first thing that exposed me to gin and that whole side of distilling, which is very different.
That's interesting. I remember visiting Edinburgh Gin years ago, and they were making quite a big deal about partnerships with Heriot-Watt and all that was going on. So that was you doing that. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's still a thing now, but it was great. It's the old story of like, the brewing and distilling course. It should be a very hands-on, like vocational subject. But you spend obviously a lot of time in lecture theatres and classrooms and stuff. And that course was a really great addition to the Heriot-Watt program, because it let you go into industry and like actually do something that went out into the real world. It wasn't great for that thesis I talked about at the start, because to go back to sort of gin and stuff, like the recipe development process for gin is often think of things that would work well together, distill them, taste it, adjust accordingly, repeat as many times as it takes to get a good recipe. So that's what we did. And at the end, they were like, now you've got to write like a science paper about this. I was like, well, we didn't do any science. So I had to go back and like, all we did
it's
was
art, not science, right?
Well, that's the thing with distillation. It's a marriage of the two. Right?
I think it's art which is fundamentally underpinned by science, right? And
that's a good way. I'd agree with that. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So we had focused on the art side of things, and we really like we were just throwing botanicals together and distilling, tasting, seeing how we got on, came up with a recipe, and then I went back and did the stuff where we took samples at the different stages and kind of like analysed and stuff. So, but yeah, the Headache Walk thing, it was great because I was really there to focus on distilling. And as soon as this project came up that said, you know, you can go and actually do recipe development for an existing brand, which it was big at the time. It wasn't not as big as it is now, but it was definitely like growing really fast. So we did a recipe for them. It was great.
Nice. So do you see whiskey in your future, given that you've done, like you say, you've done that course, you've been working at whiskey distilleries at one time or another, obviously you're Scottish as well. Mind you, there's so many Scottish gin distilleries now. I think gin is as much Scottish as single malt whiskey these days. But do you foresee whiskey in your future, or are you committed to gin for the time being?
Nah, absolutely, yeah. I'm doing a few things just now, whiskey related, working with distilleries and stuff, and I've done a little bit like independent bottling stuff in the past and that, and like with other brands that I do and stuff. So always coming back to whiskey, man. Like I love gin. I'm quite like other spirits as well. I just like to explore a wee bit of everything when it comes to the spirit world. So
nice.
Definitely whiskey stuff. I've got, like say, I don't know if they're still up in there, but yeah, whiskey projects in the works, definitely.
Cool. Good. Everyone needs a whiskey project.
Have you got the capacity and space where you are? Have you got the capacity and space where you're on the warehouse to expand into that sort of stuff if you wanted to in the future, or would you have to,
no.
you'd have to move? It's difficult to tell how big the place is that you're in, to be honest with you. It kind of looks like a hangar of some sort.
Railway arch. It's a railway arch.
Railway arch, yeah. I'm not actually going to like move
no.
because we did I've had a couple of bottling runs, so the gin's bottled here as well. And I've had some like packaging bottling runs and a few like we had online orders. Basically, the place is like chaos. So it's like you can see a bit of it, but there's boxes all over the place. But no, this. So yeah, we're in a railway arch. You might hear intermittently some rumbling, trains going overhead and stuff. But we're at capacity, man, where we are just now. So I mean, there's always if I was distilling stuff, it would be third-party storage or working with someone else. Another site to do it, or like the independent bottling stuff like that, or working with existing distilleries like the stuff I talked about there, going back and like doing a bit of analytical stuff on processes and things like that, or consultancy or recipe development stuff like that. So no, I don't unfortunately have the space or the wherewithal just now to start stacking up barrels. I don't have like in the corner.
All right. Well, do you want to talk us through the gin making process and anything about botanicals or any unique facets or considerations that you're placing on your product?
Yeah. So the guys have got the London Dry Gin, which I've got a 70cl of here.
It's really good, by the way. Like I'm actually just sipping it neat here, which you don't tend to do with gin, and it's nice. Like it's really good.
Well, that's actually a good thing. I'd forgotten about it. I remember an experience where I went into when I started the first gin distilling job I had, and some of the perks of these kind of jobs, like the first day in the job, they kind of lined up every spirit they made and were like, "You've got to taste this," because I did some tours and stuff as well. So yeah, first day you're like sampling loads of gin, and there was one particular gin. It was a Navy strength gin, and I would never have thought to drink gin neat, and I sipped that, and I was like, I would just like sip that as it is, man. And that was a total revelation that like gin doesn't have to be. You can a good gin you can sit and sip. So that was kind of that memory was when I was coming up with the recipe for this. I was like, if I can make a gin that people do that exact thing with that you did, like just sip it and go, you don't even need to put anything in that. That's good. That's kind of what that was like. What I was aiming for. So yeah, the London Dry first one we did. It's we do a few that are a wee bit more out there, but like this was the one where it's I think the first thing you put out just show people you can do the basics properly and stuff. So straight up London Dry, juniper forward gin. Like you say, there's a lot of gin getting made, in Scotland at the moment. And I was a wee bit sort of, as a consumer, a bit like jaded with it, in terms of like, can we just bring this back to like the core of what gin is? And it's, juniper at the heart of it. So when I was doing recipe design and new product development stuff, I have like a core botanical sort of thing that I start with, like your sort of all-purpose recipe, and then depending on what direction you want to take it, you can add things and take things away and stuff, but you've got your core starting point. So the recipe I had, the juniper in it, I decided I wanted this to be really, really junipery, so I tripled the juniper content based on my sort of base recipe. And then I went back and looked, and that was actually a double batch that I'd used. I'd used the wrong column in like my spreadsheet or whatever, so I times the juniper by 6 by accident. But it came out so, I really liked the taste of it, so I stuck with it. The only problem with that is like you're right on the edge of when it lushes. So if anyone watches it's not familiar, it's happens with whiskey as well. When you get the oils, particularly oils from like juniper or citrus or any sort of aniseed botanicals, they are not soluble in water, but they'll dissolve in your alcohol. But when you bring the alcohol content down, you get to that point where they come out of solution and they form this haze in your spirit. So there's so much juniper going on that when we get to that 40%, we're just on that tightrope where it just starts to get a wee bit cloudy. And we actually leave it for about a week before we bottle it, and the cloudiness just kind of redissolves. But definitely, if you're putting this over ice, it wouldn't be weird, to see it just haze up a little bit. But
do you see that if people are making martinis and drinks like that with it, you see a little louche to it, do you? In the glass,
and just that little sort of.
You don't see that very often.
Well, I think it's always that thing of like the sort of image of like a martini or a gin and tonic. It should be like crystal clear. You know what I mean? But my thing was just not compromising on the flavour. So if it throws a wee bit of louche and goes a wee bit cloudy, when those oils come out of solution, it's like when you add a wee bit of water to whiskey, like you guys will know, like that. They say opens it up. So that's all those oils come out of solution. You can smell them, and sometimes when you do that, you get this like hit of juniper and fresh citrus and that piney note when you put your nose in the glass. So yeah, don't be afraid of it if it
No, I mean from my perspective, I think it's a great point of difference and a great talking point to understand about the product, right, and the brand, because there aren't many brands out there that have that. So as long as the people that are serving this drink know what it is and how to communicate it, I think it's a fantastic USP.
That's the problem, isn't it? Is whether consumers and bartenders are aware that it's not a defect. But most people who are sort of into spirits, I think, are well aware of non-chill filtered and spirits that louche because they've got a high oil, fatty acid, whatever content. But you're always going to get some people who are like, oh, I think there's something wrong with this. It's gone off.
I think it was like you're saying the sort of campaign in whiskey to like educate people on the whole chill filtration thing that people are more likely to just say now, like this might over ice or in a cold drink or a serve or whatever might go a little bit cloudy, and that's fine. It's just like you say, that's those oils coming out. So like I say, I think people who are really into their spirits, like maybe I've heard something about that, so when they see their drink flush up, they're not that bothered. So yeah, loads and loads of juniper. The other ones are coriander, angelica, and orris root. They're sort of my core 5. Licorice root as well. Licorice root, I talked about aniseed stuff. It's more about sweetness in gin. Licorice root, it's a really good way to, you want your gin to be dry and have a lot of spice, but licorice helps balance it and gives it a wee bit of sweet. Citrus, I think, is one of the core pillars of a good London dry. So we've got dried orange peel, dried lemon peel, and a lot of people, it's quite a lot of spice. So like a lot of people pick that up when they taste this neat as well. There's loads of clove, there's loads of cinnamon, and nutmeg, which I think is a really underutilized gin botanical. I don't know if it's a wee bit more like we grate them fresh, and it's a wee bit labour intensive to grate loads of nutmeg like into the still direct. But that really almost.
How many nutmegs go? I don't want to reveal a recipe, but is there more than a single nutmeg in each batch?
It's like 3 or 4, I think. It's something like 7.78 grams of nutmeg. So yeah, like a couple.
That's quite a lot of nutmeg. Yeah. Do you know nutmeg's slightly psychoactive? Like if you eat a whole nutmeg, you're going to be in a slightly weird place.
I had this discussion with someone recently. Yeah, basically, like I've heard the story of people like trying to like basically get high off nutmeg.
Yeah, nutmegs.
Yeah. Really, like, get high off like I don't know, carrot cake or something like. It's just. I think it's one of those things where like you can.
Sugar will get you first.
No, but like the lethal not lethal, but like the required dose to hit that point is crazy. Like because I heard about this in the context of the cinnamon challenge. People try to eat spoonfuls of stuff and that, and it just doesn't work. So yeah, I think you'd have a job. Stick to
you would. I think so. Although I don't know. I guess it depends on the specific nutmeg you've got and its growing conditions and particular varietal, but I've certainly seen reference that a whole nutmeg consumed in one go by a human has the potential to give you a headache, make you feel a bit weird. Which is amazing, really, because I've got loads of nutmegs.
I know it's weird. They sell it in the supermarket. You can buy a jar like that.
Yeah.
Like
I wonder, is there a lethal dose of nutmeg?
There is, yeah, but again, you'd have to
lethal dose of everything, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, yeah.
Probably should make it clear that we don't advocate people going out there and trying to overdose on nutmeg at this point.
Yeah.
eating whole nutmeg.
So those, like I say, there's 3 or 4 nutmegs, depending on how big they are in the gin, but that will make like 150 bottles of gin. So
yeah,
you're
don't
fine.
worry, everyone is safe. So clove you mentioned as well. That's a fairly unusual botanical, I would say.
Well, that's another one that I remember in first distilling job. We used to make a Christmas gin, and we would count them out individually by hand. We would put like single-digit cloves in a 150-litre batch. I put a wee bit more in. I think it does come through. The thing with clove is the clove oil is a compound called eugenol, and it is used in the stuff you rinse your mouth out with at the dentist, like the pink stuff you swish with at the end.
It's got a slightly anaesthetic effect to it as well, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, pre-dentists, people would rub a clove on their, if they're like an abscess, they'd get a clove and squeeze it and rub clove oil on your mouth and stuff like that. And it does work, so that's why it's still in like certain dental preparations. But obviously, if you're making a gin, you don't want it to taste like the dentist. So yeah. Cinnamon
can be a bit dentisty as well if it's overdone, can't it?
Yeah, we've got cinnamon as well. We've got clove and cinnamon. So very sparing with the clove and the cinnamon.
Well, it's such a fine line, right? I mean, if you double the amount of clove in your recipe, I expect your gin would start to taste quite strongly of clove, right? Like it really is nuts how potent. Like, I mean, you know, if you do like I don't know, mulled wine at Christmas, or if you stick clove into certain like stews and casseroles, like 2 cloves versus 4 cloves is like a world of difference, you know.
Yeah. Like I say, we used to in that previous recipe, we literally count them out individually by hand.
Yeah,
that size. So, you've got to be super careful. And it's just really cloying and overpowering. Yeah. So those, like I say, those sort of 5 core botanicals are the backbone of the gin, and everything else is just like a little pinch, like more of like a sort of seasoning thing. So yeah, you want it to taste the juniper, you want it to have a bit of the brightness from the citrus, you want to have a wee bit of the spice from the coriander and stuff like that. And the other spices are just there to kind of like hover about in the background and just like give it a wee enhancement. So you talked about the provenance of stuff with nutmeg. Like some stuff we're careful about, some stuff like juniper especially, we tend to use Eastern Europe, like Macedonian juniper we've used, which we've had the best results with. I think like Bulgaria, Croatia, places like that. So like Eastern Europe we tend to focus on. But yeah, that's it. So like I said, so much. I mean, I'm sitting in front of where I weigh my botanicals now, so I have some juniper in my hand. But yeah, that's the core sort of idea behind this gin was to like make sure it really tasted like essentially what I'm doing now, like just putting your nose in a big handful of juniper berries. So
yeah, well, I mean that's kind of what London Dry is supposed to be, right? Juniper with sort of the rest of the botanicals as supporting cast, rather than
Very silly to say, but that's kind of like say where the gin market was at the time. It was kind of just getting into this whole sort of like mad flavour explosion. And I was like, okay, we'll look at that maybe for some other releases, but for the first one, keep it classic.
Just make a great gin. Yeah, I love it. So when you're distilling, is it is everything that comes off the still go into bottle, or are you diluting with neutral spirit afterwards because it's such a small still, or is it like a one-shot thing?
Still one shot. So this is one where, like, you know, we're talking about distilling like art versus like the science of it, right? So I do work, you know, I do work with contract stuff where I do multi-shot recipes, and I've done that before. It should, you know, you use the neutral grain spirit, right? It should taste of nothing. Like it's written there in the title, it shouldn't taste anything. But I swear I can taste when a gin's been multi-shotted. There's like, it's an oxymoron, but there's like a GNS sort of taste. So I've done stuff before where if anyone doesn't know about multi-shot, you can basically double or triple the amount of botanicals you put in the still, like double the recipe, make a concentrate. and then you dilute it to the desired strength of flavour you want after it's come off the still with your neutral spirit, right? Which should be neutral. You shouldn't be able to taste it, but I don't know. It's one of those things. Maybe it's like a psychological effect or whatever, but I feel like you can kind of taste when a gin is multi-shotted. So we don't do multi-shotting for any of these products, no.
Yeah, well, that's pretty cool. I mean, it's regardless of whether there's a difference, the fact that everything anyone gets in a bottle is 100% gone through that still, or indeed is water added afterwards is pretty cool.
Yeah. So it comes off about 80%, and we cut it down to 40, and bottle it just on this table I'm sitting at. So that's it.
Nice, good stuff. Tom, you're gonna?
I am. I'm going to make a drink, and I'm going a bit left field with this drink that I'm going to make this week. It's a bit different to anything else that I've made any week any month that I've made a drink. And I know Darren was saying earlier, and you were saying as well about the sort of drinkability of the gin neat. However, the drink that I'm making this week is about as far from that as you can possibly get. However, it is an absolute classic, and I'm going to make a red snapper, which for anyone that's unfamiliar is basically a gin-based Bloody Mary. And for me personally, I think it's actually better than a Bloody Mary. I think the flavours that you get from it are a bit richer, a bit deeper. Same sort of classic recipe. I'm going to add in there as well just a touch of red wine as well, which for me gives it a little bit of body, bit of sort of depth and character. And I've got a whole selection of different ingredients here, which I'm going to try and work my way through whilst making this. So I'm going to start by I'm going to clear this down.
Are you going mad with the garnish game because we're like Bloody Mary?
I've got a few I've got one or two garnishes. I've not gone super crazy.
Good.
I say this every single month, but it is true. Is that when we sort of showcase these drinks, the key thing for us is to make sure that anyone can make them at home, that they can get ingredients that are readily available in supermarkets or the corner shop or whatever it might be. So I've got a few bits. I've got some cucumber, some lemon, some pickles, some Worcester sauce, Tabasco, a bit of red wine, salt, pepper, obviously the illicit gin, tomato juice, and I'm going to keep and lemon as well. Sorry, for a bit of citrus. You could easily make this in the glass. However, I'm going to give it a quick stir over this ice that I've got here.
You're not going to throw it, no? I was thinking you were going to throw it.
No, well, no. Unfortunately,
go on.
My days of throwing drinks were about a decade ago. I think I'd just make a lot of mess, and then my wife wouldn't be happy. I'd have to clean up the whole kitchen and do all that. So, but yeah, the basics of the recipe with a red snapper, which, by the way, as a descendant of the Bloody Mary, an early 20th century drink, which is traditionally for a lot of people a hangover cure. And I'd say it'd be interesting to know actually how many Bloody Marys of all the Bloody Marys get consumed on aeroplanes as well, or in airports, because I'd imagine that about 80 to 90% of them are consumed whilst either in flight or about to board a flight. Funnily enough, it's very rare that you ever see anyone just drinking a Bloody Mary either at home or in a bar, which I find quite fascinating.
Funnily enough, on that, a friend of mine who's just flying out to Mexico sent me a picture of him on a plane earlier today, laying back with the Bloody Mary, and the comment he said was, "I swear Bloody Marys taste better on planes."
Exactly. That's what I mean. For some reason, I've no idea why. It just seems to be the place for them. So I'm going to start with, obviously, with the illicit gin. I'm going to go with about, I'm going to go with about 40 mil, 35 to 40 mil for this particular drink. I'm going to add in there a splash of red wine. In this case, it's an Australian Shiraz, but it's not that important in this recipe. It just gives it a bit of body, a bit of depth. I'm going to add a couple of dashes of Tabasco. Depending on how spicy you want it, you could add more if you have a more preference towards spice. Worcester sauce, I'm going to add 4 or 5 dashes of that in there. Pinch of salt. Nice pinch of salt in there. A little bit of pepper over the top. I'm going to add a squeeze of lemon juice. Not too much, but just a little bit of lemon juice in there.
I think lemon juice is everything's important in a red snapper Bloody Mary, but I think it's one of the ingredients that's easily forgotten and is a bit of a game changer.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, it just adds. It adds that balance doesn't it? The citrus
Just
element
makes
to
it
You've got the
fresher,
richness
otherwise it's quite flabby and vegetal and, like it's like soup basically, whereas the lemon sort of turns it into a cocktail.
The smell just you use, it can get quite soupy,
Yeah, exactly. Tomato juice. Just going to add a bit of tomato juice in there as well. Make sure I haven't left any of my. There's about 6-7 ingredients here. Make sure I've left nothing out. And I'm going to give this a quick stir down. Like Tristan was referring to, some people throw them, which would be basically throwing it from one vessel to another to aerate it. You could also build it as well. You want to keep it simple. You can just make it straight in the glass.
Or bottle it, ready for your hangover.
Bottle it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When normally at home, when we have guests over, tends to be around New Year or Christmas. I'll make a whole jug of it. I'll literally make that whole jug of Bloody Mary ready to go, and people will just pour their own over ice. So great drink to batch up as well. So give that a quick stir, and then I'm just going to reach over to my freezer, which is here, and grab a glass. And I'm going to strain this over ice again. In fact, to be fair, this drink actually, when it's stirred down like this, it's actually incredibly pleasant without any ice. Just pouring it without ice at all is also fantastic. But I've got ice in this glass, and then I'm going to garnish it. This is the beauty of this drink: is you can pretty much garnish it with anything. I've had Bloody Marys and red snappers that have been garnished with pretty much anything that's behind the bar, from olives and pickles and cucumber and celery.
Half a meal sometimes, like bacon,
and everything that you can think of.
Bacon.
In this case, I've got a pickle, which I'm a massive fan of pickles, that I'm just going to lay on there. I've also got a spear of cucumber, which I'm just going to pop alongside that, and a wedge of lemon, which I'm actually just going to squeeze over the top, or just to the side there. As you can see, I'm probably going to struggle to get my lips in there, especially with my nose. I think I'll really struggle. But there you have a red snapper, basically a gin-based Bloody Mary, and the perfect hangover cure, amazing on planes. And I don't think I've ever had one at this time of night, ever. So it's the first time for everything. So cheers to that.
Cheers, man.
Lovely. The Connaught used to do one, didn't they, with a celery foam on top? That was absolutely fantastic. It's so good.
It was in a coupe or like a martini glass, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No ice.
Yeah, it was really good.
They are great. I mean, they're fantastic drinks. And I think they also, if I remember rightly, they used to clarify their tomato juice as well. So you had this drink that actually looked almost like a martini. It wasn't perfectly clear, but it was almost clear. And it had this nice celery foam on top. But when you tasted it, it had such a depth of flavour. Not everything was in there. It was like super concentrated flavour inside. An amazing drink. But yeah, it's a classic and one that's not going anywhere.
Yeah, sure. Cool. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there, unless anyone has anything else to add. But that's fantastic insight into your gin making process. And actually, it's nice to get into some of the nitty gritty of it with someone who obviously knows what they're talking about when it comes to chemistry and distillation. Because it's with Gin Me, we get such a range of different producers, and it's not always brand owners. Sometimes it's brand ambassadors, and I think it's our members will be interested to sort of hear some of the more kind of nitty gritty of how these gins are put together.
Yeah. I've got one last question.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, Darren, which it occurred to me a while back that I forgot to ask, was around the sort of branding, which I think is fantastic.
Oh yeah.
I think the brand itself, the way it's positioned, and what the look, the feel of it, the tone, the language, this sort of lo-fi urban distilling. I think is very, very cool. And it was the first thing, to be honest with you, that really caught my eye about it. When you sent the samples over and we started speaking about it, I was like, yeah, this is really interesting. Even before understanding your story and what and your background. So I was just interested to understand, where that kind of came from, what the thought process was in terms of the positioning of the brand. Obviously, you're based in Glasgow, aren't you? Right. So it fits so nicely with Glasgow, for me at least, when you think about it as a city. So just to know a little bit about that, really.
Part of it's exactly that. Like I think it's difficult when you, especially again at the time when we launched, when you were starting a new gin brand, especially, there was this sort of a lot of gin distilleries popping up, and I think the default setting for naming them was to name them after the place it came from. And obviously, with all spirits, there's always a connection from where you want there to be that connection with where it's made and the product itself. So I wanted that. Like, I wanted it to be, like you said, reflect Glasgow, but I thought it's a wee bit just sort of too on the nose to just call it something, you know, just name it after, we're in a place called Tradeston, like call it like Tradeston Gin or something like that. So I thought, well, can we choose a name and a brand that kind of evokes like the sort of spirit of Glasgow, like the attitude or whatever. So yeah, Glasgow's a kind of real thriving culture, but it's a wee bit gritty, and it's a post-industrial city, and that's reflected in the space. You know, the city's full of these spaces like this that are these like industrial repurposed spaces that people are trying to do like new or interesting or creative things with. So it was all kind of tied into that. The lo-fi thing was, I really liked that, apart from being, you know, a music lover and loving that connection to be able to talk about spirits using the same language you would use for music. I was speaking with the guy who does our design stuff, and I was just trying to describe the process we use to him. And he was like, yeah, you need a phrase that just encapsulates that neatly. So you can see from the still behind me, it's gas fired. There's just a flame underneath, which, you know, Health and Safety and Network Rail, who are our landlords, like they love that. Like there's just alcohol and just naked flames. But
below that trains.
They've given me all the stories of what happens if something's wrong. But it's, you know, it's a big copper pot with a fire underneath and a tube that collects the vapor, and then the condenser on this bit here is just a spiral and tap. And I was just saying, it's really simple. And the thing that I've learned weirdly through, you know, we started off talking about a lot of technical stuff, but like the real basis at the core of gin distilling is really, really simple. You know, it tastes of what you put in it, and it's, you can talk about whiskey and things and the mystery of how certain flavors get into it. There's not really with gin, and that can be, you know, it can take away a wee bit of the mystery, but if you're a distiller, it gives you all this freedom. It tastes of whatever you can get your hands on, whatever you put in it, you make it taste that. So I was just conveying that, like, you don't need, and it was a thing that when I started out, not to like go into too much detail this, but you know, we didn't have massive funding or money behind us, so it was always going to be like the simplest bit of kit we could use. But I love the idea of when you have a limitation in a business or in any project, how can you flip that and make that like a strength, right? So we can't get a big bells and whistles still with columns and plates and deflamators and all this stuff. But then I realized that you don't need that to make a gin and a good product. So how do we kind of like, you know, so this term lo-fi, which comes to music, you know, you don't need an orchestra, or you don't need like an expensive guitar bit of kit. You can, you know, if you have good skills and you know what you're doing and stuff, you know, you can make something good with very simple equipment. So the lo-fi thing was just a really simple way of it. The urban part of it brings in the fact that we're in Glasgow, we're close to Central Station, we're in a railway arch, we're in the city, the Illicit thing, you know, a bit of gin's gritty past, but a bit of Glasgow's gritty past kind of married together. And the lo-fi thing was just a good way of describing that sometimes like the things that are made on the simplest setups and equipments and bits of kit can actually be really, really good quality products. So we thought that that little phrase just kind of tied it all together nicely. So that's
it's really nice. I really liked it. Everything about it, to be honest. As a brand, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. Cool. Great stuff. Well, thank you. And thanks everyone for watching. And well, look, hopefully we'll feature you again some other time with one of the more crazy iterations.
Yeah, we've got plenty of stuff, man, and whiskey and other, you know, keep in touch, definitely. Yeah. No, thanks for having me, guys, and I hope all the everyone watching who got a wee sample in the post really enjoyed it. So yeah, thank you very much.
Cool. Cheers.
Appreciate it.
Right, cheers.